What's the most chaotic good thing you've done? Story 1, accidentally dropping customer belongings. So I am required to replace them at no cost. Normally, you break a thing, you go to the technicians, and pay a fee to repair it. If an employee dropped the customer's stuff, the customer can turn and say, hey, this only started because a randomer dropped it. So the rule was to just replace it with what we can. If it's an older model and not around anymore, they get a new one. I only ever did it twice. One was a younger girl that spent her saved birthday and holiday money on an unbeknownst to her imitation MP3 player. So we weren't supposed to replace it. But how do you tell an 8-year-old that she wasted all her money from years' tough lesson? Poor me got butterfingers, I guess, since I dropped that other lady was very pregnant, busted phone, and her mother in the hospital that she had on her computer on Skype almost the whole time, as it wasn't looking so good. Phone was out of warranty, not easy to use. She clearly had a lot going on, and oh no. Dumb me, dropping things all over. Now we have to replace it, but on our dime instead. Shucks, hope you moved your pictures to the drive or something. Story 2, I had neighbors for about a year that mistreated their dogs. We live in the South, and it wasn't uncommon for them to leave them outside all day long while they were at work chained up, and without any water. During the summer, they did it almost every day, so I stole their dogs and gave them to my friend's dad because he had a lot of property and treated his dogs like royalty. Story 3, scammed a friend's dad out of $350 back in high school by making a print shop brochure for some fake Bible retreat, so we could get him out of that abusive household for a week and go party it up on my family's property. Story 4, hacked a school computer, left a note that I had hacked it, and what I could see. The next week, machine was no longer on the network. They had every single student's SSNs, links to ID photos in a public directory, and full contact details unprotected in a Microsoft Access database. How did I hack it? I used Microsoft Remote Desktop to log into what I thought was my assigned machine in another lab using the default student account. It was not the machine I thought it was. Story 5, we had been in a lecture for about 3 hours. Everybody clearly wanted a break, but the lecturer wouldn't let us have one and was pushing on. I downloaded a remote app for my phone and used it to turn the screen off. The lecturer turned it back on, and I turned it off again. We all got a 10-minute break while he spoke to the IT department to see what was going on. Story 6, this deed was not done by me. But for me, having recently cut back a forest's worth of English ivy from our new property, and finding that the stack of ivy was cold and green and wouldn't light, my husband decided to add a generous portion of gasoline to the pile. The ensuing fireball caused great alarm to our neighbors, who called the fire department. When the engines arrived, the fire had already burned out, fast and hot. The fire chief found 2 young idiots with the remains of a bonfire, and told us that technically, it is illegal to have a fire outside of the home unless you're cooking something. He said that last part slowly, with a wink. We looked at him blankly for a moment, nodding, until the light bulb went on, and I ran inside to produce a bag of marshmallows from the kitchen. The fire chief smiled and led the firefighters out of our yard, saving us from a huge fine. Story 7, I was working at a pizza place. I got an order for $75 worth of food. The customer walked in when it was about done. At first, I thought she was mad because she wasn't responding to me. I asked her what was wrong. She broke down crying her house had just burned down. She had nothing, her and her 5 kids were living with her mom. I gave her a hug and talked to her for a bit. When she left, I canceled her order and put the money back on her card. She realized what I did a few days later and sent me a very heartwarming letter. Ed and getting a few people here, and they're saying she could have been a scammer. This customer had given me her credit card before telling me what happened and didn't seem to want to tell me at first, nor did she ask for any sort of discount. I have no doubt that her situation was real, especially considering I knew where her house was as it was right by the high school I went to. Not everyone is a scammer. Story 8, I'm not entirely sure if it's called chaotic good or not, but I'm sure someone will appreciate the story. I was working in a restaurant that required all servers, food runners, and busboys to wear Vans. It was a hip urban scratch kitchen. So everyone wore skinny jeans, Vans, and all the dudes had beards. For the servers, it wasn't a huge deal. But busboys and food runners, we spent a great deal of our time in the kitchen. Van's kitchen floor does not mix well. People were constantly slipping. I got fed up, so I just started wearing non-slip kitchen shoes without asking. Someone in management eventually noticed and told me I could wear Vans or get fired. So I brought up OSHA requirements. Since I was OSHA certified from my previous job, I was well versed in kitchen safety requirements. I didn't threaten to call OSHA. I just mentioned that OSHA's safety compliance requires all staff whose primary work positions are located in the kitchen to wear non-slip shoes. It didn't work. I wanted to keep my job, so I didn't threaten to report them. What I did instead was a little malicious compliance. The next day, I came in with Vans. Now, one thing I was known for was my ability to carry an inhuman amount of plates. I could stack them up and down both arms and balance them, never dropped a single one. It actually earned me direct tips, which food runners never got. So I loaded up my arms and intentionally slipped, losing well over 100 worth of food to the floor, and I immediately pretended like my butt back was in serious pain, even though I barely felt it through the fat. My manager immediately went into crisis prevention mode and brought me into the office, obviously trying to avoid the list of lawsuits I could bring down on him for OSHA violations and workplace injury due to gross negligence. Instead, I offered him a simple solution: let us wear non-slip shoes, and I want file for workman's comp, report them to OSHA, or sue for forcing me to wear improper footwear at the threat of losing my job. He happily agreed, not realizing all of this was a setup on my end. All he saw was the money and possibly job he was about to lose. He thought he came out on top while giving me and everyone else exactly what we wanted. All I had to do was take one for the team and pretend to get hurt. From that day forward, all primary kitchen staff were made to wear non-slip shoes. Nobody else slipped once in my time there, and our financial loss to floor food was cut down significantly. Story 9 ID, almost forgotten about this. Way back in Diablo 2's heyday, people got their accounts stolen by scammers all the time. I got mine stolen because I was 14 and stupid. After a while of sulking, I moved on, but a few days after it happened, a friend of a friend showed me how to recover it. Apparently, there was a difference in the synchronization between regions for account credentials. The US was up to date on a patch, while EU wasn't. This means that if someone took your account and changed a password, it was lost on US, but on EU, it was still in the database with the old password. Funny quirk was that if you logged into EU with the old password, it reverted the US login credentials to the old one as well. Once I was wise to how it worked, I opened a small business as a stolen account hunter. ID post in chat that I can help those who have been hit. All I needed was the password of their account before it was taken and changed on US. ID take them to a private channel, explain the process, and go about it if they trusted me. ID rejoin the channel with the old account and ask them if it was it. If it was, then ID collect a fee by taking an item of my choosing and trading it to my account for compensation. They'd get their account back. I got an item I might have been looking for, and everyone was happy, except the scammer who I stole from, robbed from the evil. Give to the good for a small fee. Story 10 in college. One of the RAs in my dorm created a seasonal temporary bulletin board physical board. Not an internet thing called a grievance board. I believe the concept was humorous and based on something from Seinfeld, which may give you an idea of how long ago I went to college. The idea was that people would anonymously post their grievances about their fellow dorm mates in a theoretically good-natured manner. The reality ended up being that while some of it was well-spirited, it ended up devolving into a platform for harassment of specific people. And while no one would admit publicly to having their feelings hurt, several different people admitted to me and another friend privately that it made them feel really awful. So one day me and that friend set an alarm for 3:30 a.m., snuck to the board, and quietly took the whole thing down, leaving a typed anonymous message in its place that while we appreciated the spirit in which the board was intended, it was causing more harm than good. Story 11A train station I went through every day had one of those shitty talking signs that admonishes anything that moves nearby not to take luggage on the escalator, always the same message. And it plays this regardless of whether they have luggage or even approaching the escalator, which happened approximately every 20 seconds. It annoyed me when I was just waiting for 15 minutes, and I can only assume it was worse for the workers in the food places right nearby. The workers couldn't do anything about it without risking punishment. I could, though, every time I went through the station ID, unplug that thing. Story 12, I had a job during high school, but didn't have any real bills to pay, so I gave away a lot of my money. But for some reason, I was embarrassed about it. I guess I didn't want anyone to think I was giving money to get attention or recognition. So I would slip money into donation jars, only if no one was looking. One time my classroom was doing a fundraising collection for an earthquake or something like that, and I felt really strongly that I wanted to help. So when I had a minute alone, I slipped what was left of my paycheck into the jar. It was around 80. My teacher came into the room, saw the money, and got kind of weird about it. Who did this? Who put this money in here? Nobody answered, wanted to die inside. He kept pushing. He started asking individual students, was it you? Did you see who it was? Everyone kept saying, no, we don't know who did it. Before he got to me, another teacher interrupted. I think that whoever put the money in there probably didn't want anyone to know it was them. And you should stop. Thank you, other teacher. Story 13, I worked in an animal hospital years ago. A lady brought in a very, very sweet, docile, 1-year-old female pit bull to have put down. She claimed the dog bit her when she tried to break up a fight it was having with her other dog. Every dog owner worth anything knows to never reach into a dog fight, because you will most definitely get bit. Our hospital policy was that we would not do convenience euthanasias, but since the dog actually bit someone, we were obligated. If my memory serves me right, the dog was also not current on its rabies vaccine, which means once it's euthanized, federal law states you have to have the dead dog's brain tested for rabies in an out-of-state lab. Use your imagination on what we have to do to that dog to have its brain sent to that lab. We tried pleading with the owner, but it was clear she just wanted to get rid of the dog. She filled the euthanasia paperwork out and left. Me and a few other staff members took the dog and put it in an isolation area as opposed to the treatment area where hospital procedures take place. It was a busy hospital, and the vets had their hands full. Maybe they forget the dog was there. Maybe we forgot to put the euthanasia on the whiteboard. Maybe one of us took the dog and found it a loving home. Edit my first silver. This made my whole day. Thank you, kind stranger. Story 14 helped a homeless guy steal from takeaway about 5 years ago. It was the kind of independently owned place that does pizza, fried chicken, and kebabs, and I had had quite a bit to drink. He tried to buy food. The clerk told him to get out. He had the money for this meal. I then said I'd buy him the food and to go sit down and wait. The clerk went over and told him to get lost. He got a little upset, saying, I just want to eat something. I have money, but the probably 19-year-old clerk wouldn't have it. He got a bit upset and walked outside. I see him go S&D sit in a bench just outside and put his head in his hands like he was about to weep. When the clerk came back to serve me, I ordered both our food, and she said I'm not going to give you what he wanted because then he will always come in here begging for handouts. I said to her, I am a paying customer, and I want to buy these 2 meals. She then said I will only sell you 1 meal. My response, having not paid for anything yet, was, okay, then well now this is happening. I turned to the next counter and picked up the tray of food that was just about to be handed over to a customer and saying to her, make sure they give you another meal, knowing full well they would have to, as she hasn't even sat down with it. I then walked straight out the front door up to the homeless gent and handed him the meal. The look of shock on his face as the clerk came outside, I just stepped in front of her and kept repeating, you have no right to touch me, while my new friend steadily paced away with a tray of hot food. More of the staff came out to intervene, and they said the police had been called as I had committed theft. I ran away in my stupor and have not entered the shop since. Story 15, I was in charge of the kids' wear department at work once. I was the longest running member of staff there, and we had no managers for that department. I was in charge of doing the rota for the day, as I knew how it worked and what was needed. 2 of my coworkers flirted relentlessly when they were both in the same day, and it just so happened to be a quiet day. So I put them both to be on lunch break together, and for me to just be around in one of the not-so-busy departments. I could trust them both to do their jobs, and as it wasn't busy, they were able to talk and connect all day. They went on lunch together, and they came back together practically holding hands. It was so cute. They dated not so secretly for a while, so I like to think I did some good. Story 16 basically pulled a Ferris Bueller to help my buddy GF get out of school. We were college freshmen at the time, and she was a high school senior, and she really wanted to surprise her for his birthday at college since they were doing the long-distance thing. So I took the day off from classes and drove up to her school a couple hours away. She had already come up with a doctor's excuse, but I called the front office to verify it, and they let her go. Don't know if they actually believed it or just didn't care, but I stayed in the car with shades on to keep up appearances in case they were watching. Thankfully, since we left so early, we were able to make it back in time to surprise my buddy for his birthday. Feel like I did some good because they ended up staying together through HS and into college, and now they're married. Not sure if chaotic enough, but last week I was at a bulk food store for discount candy after work. So I printed out a coupon, 3 off a 10 purchase, then printed out 4 more copies for other people. Then I gave them to people in the store with large purchases. Cue confusion and excitement. My total ended up being less than 10, so I gave my own coupon to the dude behind me. Story 17, my 12th grade teacher couldn't get permission to take our class on an excursion. So he found the date of our Cultural Diversity Day for that year coincided with his scheduled paternity leave, and there was no chance his wife would still be pregnant at that point. He encouraged us all to skip school that day, meet in the city, and go to this museum exhibit as a group. He met us there with his family. We grabbed lunch as a class afterwards. It was great. Instead of watching the football team do the haka and being bored all day, we got to learn about Pompeii. It also gave me the attitude of there's no point on being in school for days you're not learning or participating. So if my kids aren't interested in sports days or things when they're older, we can go to the zoo or museums or bushwalk or some other activity they'd actually benefit from. Story 18A friend and I wrote a composition together for a high school music class that was supposed to be an individual work. Her teacher gave her an A, and mine gave me a C for the identical piece. I brought up the discrepancy with my teacher, mostly to point out that he was a canoe. His response was to correctly point out that what we did was plagiarism and failed us both for the assignment. I approached him later and confessed that she wrote the composition and I copied her work. He said he appreciated my honesty and would restore her mark to an A and allow me to rewrite. We both ended up with as. Story 19, I secretly greased the squeaky door hinge to our office. A week went by, and someone in a staff meeting said, has anyone noticed the door doesn't squeak anymore? The meeting broke out with everyone freaking out. Some people knew something was different, but couldn't place it. Relief was felt all around, and no one has found out it was me. Story 20, my entire family forgot my mom's 40th birthday. I was only 11, so I feel that I kind of had an excuse to forget, because I was a kid, but I vowed I'd make it up to her on her 50th. Last year, I planned 3 months in advance. I ordered decorations, invited distant family members, rented the venue, called my mom's boss, and got her coworkers on board with the story, the whole nine, to make it the most special surprise birthday ever. I had to lie and tell her a month in advance that I'd have to miss coming home for her 50th birthday, because I had some work stuff come up, and I also had my mom's boss tell her there was a mandatory work meeting at the venue I'd rented on her birthday. So she was thinking that on her 50th birthday, her kid wouldn't be able to come home, and she was stuck on a stupid work meeting. She was heartbroken for a whole month. Her face made it all worth it when she opened the door, though. I still get teary-eyed when I watch the video. Story 21, when I worked at a fast food restaurant back in college. Now, and then I would add extra stuff into whatever I was preparing, extra fries, extra meatballs, and on the rare occasions I could pull off a level 100 sneak, extra patties. It always feels nice to make someone's day, although I don't get to see it, or even they don't realize that there's something extra in their meal, and it seems like a whole lot of people aren't getting the point. I simply added an extra of what was already in the food. Story 22, worked as the IT guy for a think tank in DC. Had to support a multi-user CPM dinosaur. This was a long time ago, but not so long ago as to make that computer even vaguely appropriate to still have in service, suggested PCs instead, and was told we were going to use the dinosaur until it died. Waited a couple of weeks, then yanked the 10 MB Bernoulli floppy drives out in mid-boot, utterly destroying them. Reported the catastrophic failure, irreparable, ordered new PCs for everyone the day after. Story 23, a buddy and I used to break into and take the doors off our friend's Jeep in high school about once a week and hide them around campus during lunch. It was a tiny school, and all of us were good friends. It was good fun. She used to get me back by hiding my drama bag in random empty lockers. Fun times, anyway. I wasn't just taking the doors off her Jeep, and neither was my buddy Chris. We knew that girl worked 2 jobs after school, and her booze-hound mom used to take the money that she worked hard for. We put loose change and a few bills in the car when we took the doors in places that she might assume she had dropped her tip money. She would come in some mornings and flop down next to me so excited because she had found or a tin in between the seats or something. I'm sure she figured out what was going on when Chris and I graduated. We were a year ahead of her, but yeah. So breaking into someone's car to leave the money is the most CG thing I have done. Molly, if you were out there, I hope you got away from your mom. After my most recent breakup, I would go out at like 2 a.m., get super baked, and just pick up trash around the neighborhood. Story 24, I remember reading once how there was some meth addict at a mall. Apparently a shoplifter ran out of a store with the alarm going off, but the meth addict clotheslined him and did a victory scream with his foot on the shoplifter's chest. Story 25, today, I was pushing a cart out of the grocery store with a bunch of other shoppers. As we're exiting, the black guy in front of me is stopped and asked for his receipt by a store employee. Employee checks each item in guy's cart. Once the employee was satisfied the shopper wasn't trying to steal anything, he let him go. I'm right behind the shopper, and the employee starts to walk off. I call out, "Don't you want to check my groceries too?" I'm holding out my receipt, and the employee looks generally confused. He manages a yeah, sure, and I make him go through my whole cart. As I leave, I notice the couple behind me doing the same thing to the employee, and the lady behind that couple getting her receipt out too. I go to that place all the time, and they never check receipts. I don't usually do stuff like that, but seeing this shopper singled out really made me angry. Story 26, I was the kid who could mimic other kids' parents' handwriting, being me something they wrote, and I could do a reasonable replication. I wrote a lot of excuse from PE notes. I also wrote a roommate's final paper, because she was exhausted and writing papers is kind of my thing. She got an A and treated me to a sushi feast. No regrets. Story 27, I went to the gym Planet Fitness, and this group of 3 people was ahead of me. Apparently 2 of them were visiting the third person, and they decided to go to the gym together. If you have the premium membership, you're allowed to bring 1 guest in, and the employee was apologizing for not being able to let all 3 in. They turned to leave, and so I spoke up and said I'd check the third person in. The employee looked stunned at me and said she didn't think that was how it worked. I replied that I had the premium membership and that third person would be my guest. They let the group in. Story 28, as an employee of financial institution with a pretty bad rep state and federal laws unbreakable, company guidelines flexible, I have thankfully been able to work with people a lot when it comes to things like payment extensions rescheduling. And so long as there's no added interest fees and things like that to break compliance. Can't outright tell people what to ask for in these cases, but plenty of instances of so what you're saying is, or so would help you out a lot if, and so on. Story 29, I work at a gas station, and sometimes when people who look like they're down on their luck ask for gas and hand me some change, I accidentally type 10.53 instead of 1.53 when I set their pumps, especially the ones who seem genuinely embarrassed about it, and you can tell they're really stressed. Story 30, my male friend was really into my female best friend, but she thought he was kind of nerdy or just otherwise unnoticeable. I kept dropping subtle hints that I found him attractive, eventually perhaps unconsciously getting her to agree. I then convinced her to ask him to the winter dance. They dated for 3 years and lost their virginities to each other before going separate ways in college. Story 31, people were being to a substitute teacher who was just a sweet old lady, and so I screamed, "Shut it." At the top of my lungs, the entire class went silent. If you're wondering what the normal teacher did to punish us, he made us watch a documentary instead of go to recess. This is because he knew the troublemakers hated this particular documentary, but everyone else either liked it or was indifferent. It's like a full class punishment, but the kids who did nothing wrong are rewarded. Story 32, I waive basically every library fine I come across at work. I have the authority and permission to waive, so basically everyone gets their account cleared. Story 33, I hesitate to even mention this, but there was an autistic kid that was being bullied by this hockey player when I was in high school. The autistic kid didn't even realize he was being bullied, I don't think, but I saw this go on day in and day out for about a week. I reported it, but the teacher didn't do anything. The vice principal said head talk to the bully, and he did. The bullying continued. It may have been simple things like messing with his stuff or making rude comments, but then when this bully tripped the autistic kid and he fell down the stairs, ID had enough. I helped the autistic kid up and then went on my way. This was a big flight of stairs. They were metal and concrete, and they were in the corners of the building and were the only way to get up and down my high school. The next day, the bully was getting ready to walk down the same flight of stairs. I stuck my leg out in front of his and pushed him forward, throwing him down the stairs. The bully didn't like this. He got up and ran up the stairs. Before he reached the top, I pushed him back down the stairs, and this time he hit his head, so the bully comes up a third time and tries to fight. By this time, his friends have gathered round. Hockey players, I punched him very, very hard in the liver. He fell back down the stairs. The vice principal interviewed everyone who was rumored to have been present. About 10 people saw me do this. The bully's friends told the VP what I'd done. I don't know what the others said. The next day, the VP calls me in his office, asks what happened. I'm a terrible liar, so I just said that the bully mysteriously fell down the stairs 3 times in a row and seemed to hurt his right side very badly, but I didn't know any more details, an implausible story. The vice principal told me that he had some eyewitness testimony, but the details varied about how it was that the bully fell down the stairs. For example, he wasn't sure if I threw the bully down the stairs, or if I simply tripped the bully and made him fall, or in what order those things may have happened. So he said, Mr. Theory of Doom, the fact that I am unable to reach a conclusion this time doesn't mean that I would be unable to reach a conclusion the next time. So don't let there be a next time, unless the little deserves it. There wasn't a next time, but only because the bully left the autistic kid alone. I'd have probably done worse the second time. Story 34, I don't feel great about keeping paper money that other people lose on the ground. So, if I find a bill in a busy public area where there's little chance of getting it back to the owner, I usually fold it up neatly and hide it in a weird spot for attentive people to discover. Story 35, I live on a street that has a bunch of cafes with apartments on top. Said cafe sidewalks also double as a sleeping spot for the homeless at night, who honestly had never been problematic and always get up and leave by sunrise. I was smoking on my balcony when I heard a girl at a neighboring block of apartments that got into a massive fight with her boyfriend. He told her to get out of his house. She was sobbing like mad and walked down the road and kind of hit around a corner, which was right under my balcony. Not feeling okay with her being on the street, in tears, amongst probably dozens of homeless men, but also not feeling like it's appropriate to invite her into my apartment. I went downstairs and pretended to be on a walk. I offered her a cigarette and asked if she also likes to walk around this block at night. We chatted for a while and realized that we had so many mutual friends and that she had been my boyfriend's tattoo artist before we dated. We had a few cigarettes together till we were around the block and in front of her flat again. I watched her go in, and it didn't look like he kicked her out again. TLDR, I was eavesdropping a couple's fight and ended up walking around the block with the girl in the middle of the night to make sure she was safe. Story 36, my dad was homophobic and my sister is a lesbian. He wanted her to be more feminine, so he would offer her money to get her hair done or nails. Him being a complete, she would say she needs 100 for her nails. She would go buy some press-on nails, pocket the rest. Story 37, I was waiting at a restaurant register to pay for a sandwich. Sandwich was in hand. I was super hungry. Just wanted to get rung up so I could stuff my face. The place was busy, and once 5 minutes passed and I was still waiting, I decided to just leave without paying. I walked for about a minute and crossed paths with a homeless guy who was panhandling. I heard I'm hungry, just need some money for food, and figured he needed my stolen sandwich more than I did. So I gave it to him and continued on my way, still hungry AF. Story 38, I used to start fights with bullies that picked on my friends in elementary school, especially when teachers wouldn't do anything about it despite multiple complaints and bruises. By high school, ID toned down a bit and would just report to teachers, the principal, if a student felt uncomfortable doing it themselves. The principal sighed whenever I came to his office, probably pretty tattletale of me, but I was sick of the innocent, nerdy kids getting pushed around for liking books or whatever. Most notable is probably using my size and intimidating nature to tell off a boy verbally and emotionally abusing his girlfriend in the school hallway. Told her to come to me if she ever had problems with him again, and I would make sure he left her alone. Right as a teacher walked up behind them, only to hear my swearing and threats. I got let off with a warning, but never saw that girl with that boy for the rest of my high school years. I think someone else getting infuriated on her behalf helped her realize how unacceptably the boy was treating her. In university, I would just keep my work open and kind of break rules for really nice visitors. Boss knew, but turned a blind eye since nothing bad happened when I did this. I identify a lot with the chaotic good alignment. Story 39, when I was an undergrad, I worked in the main campus library at the circulation desk. One day, an officer from campus safety came and installed an empty poster frame on a pillar at the desk. We spent about a week excitedly wondering what they were going to put in the frame. Eventually, we came in and found that they had put up a poster that said something along the lines of 1 in 4 women will be assaulted during their college career. And that was it. No advice, no assistance, nothing. I wrote the National Rape Hotline number on a piece of paper and added it to the poster. So it was at least somewhat helpful. Then I looked up the company that made the poster. It came from a company called Clement Communications, and they have posters for all different industries like manufacturing, laboratories, etc. They also offered free samples, so I ordered a sample of the trucking safety series. A week later, my posters arrived. There was one that said something generally positive about trucking, one about avoiding using drugs, and one reminding people to chalk your wheels. I went back to the library, took down the fear-mongering poster about assault, and replaced it with the poster suggesting that students chalk their wheels. The poster stayed up for about a month. A coworker told me that the public safety officer who had put up the first one came through and did a double take, but on seeing that the new poster was from the right company, left it up. Story 40, there's a website that lists unsecured machines on the internet. I accessed a NAS, so basically a hard drive connected to the internet, snooped through, found a file called passwords. Everything was there, bank, eBay, Amazon, you name it. I used the Amazon data and sent them a huge, with a birthday note attached, how to secure the drive. Paid for by their own money. Story 41, not me. But when I was about 6, my mom broke into our neighbor's garage to steal their kitten that was essentially being used as a chew toy for their dog. The kitten's insides were a mess, and she had to have some corrective surgery, and as a result was never comfortable with being picked up, but she'd climb on your lap on her own accord to let you know she wanted to be petted. She grew up healthy, was comfortable and bossy with our dog, despite her experience, and lived a long and happy life with us. Story 42, worked at a gas station once. Across the road, there was a lady, her husband, their 2-year-old son, and a beautiful, sweet blue pit bull. Both lady and husband were addicted to prescription drugs. The child was practically feral. The husband owed and just got worse from there. The pit that was once a healthy dog lost weight drastically. The lady was never sober. The child was caught escaping the house while she was high and walking down the road multiple times. Child Protective Services were called, and the mother was put in jail for negligence and endangerment. Kid was put with family. Dog was left at the house in a pen where another family member was supposed to be caring for it. 2 days later, this dog is running loose and gets into my store. I didn't even recognize the poor thing. Some college-age guys offered to put him up and came back saying there was no food or water left out. Caught the same college guys trying to discreetly load the dog into their car. I gave them some chicken to help him along. No regrets. Don't do drugs, feed your dogs, watch your kids.